Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast. Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Kalil Sherrod. Coach Sherrod is a strength coach at Sports Performance Coach Fit 360. Prior to that, he was at the RAC Athletic Performance Center. He hosts the Get Clean podcast, helping young strength coaches and parents expand their knowledge. He is a former Division II and semi-pro basketball player. Coach Sherrod is certified through Westside Barbell and Byrd Sports Performance. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Thank you for having me on.
So we talked quite a while back, and you had some life-changing events going on in your life. So I don't know how much you talk about it, but working through fighting and overcoming cancer, what has that been like the last few months for you?
So you mean the last few months? I did a stem cell transplant a month ago. So this has been like the final thing, and so far it's looking good. Like I haven't had any of the symptoms like usual when cancer has come back. Because like cancer, the chemo treatments have made it go away, and it quickly has come back. And by now I would have had the symptoms that I usually get. So fingers crossed, that means like everything's good. We'll do a PET scan on August 10th when I'm done with being quarantined from the stem cell transplant. Because basically what happens is they take my stem cells out, 6 days of hard chemo, then they put my stem cells back in to basically help all my blood counts come back up. Because what happens is that level of chemo floors all your different blood. So, your platelets, your hemoglobin, you're actually taking your white blood counts out. So right now, the reason why I'm in quarantine, even though I'm feeling good, is because it also takes like all your vaccines out. So basically like I'm basically a newborn baby. So like my immune system is zero, right? So like I have to slowly build up to really being around other people, crowded spaces. Like there's a certain amount of time I could be on a plane. It's about a year before I can travel like to like a tropical kind of place outside the country, all that. And it takes up to 2 years to get all my vaccines again. I'll tell you one thing, I'm not getting one certain vaccine. You can guess which one that is. So if you ever want to get rid of it, you just got to do a stem cell transplant. But like I have been battling it since I've been diagnosed 2 August ago. So basically, like when I'm out of quarantine, that'll be kind of like when I went into the hospital the first time I got diagnosed. But they said it had been growing for about 6 to 8 months. And when I look back, about 8 months, that was about that January, December, that January, for some reason, I started getting fatigue for no reason, wasn't sleeping. I would be at work and would throw up food. Couldn't like it. One day it would be chicken, next day it would be beef. So couldn't pinpoint it. Was losing weight when I wasn't trying to, and started plateauing in my list for the first time. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, it's just funny looking back, and I'm like, oh, well, by July, your whole right lung was collapsed and you had fluid all in that lung. Like, it's just crazy where I'm like, nah, it's probably, I just need to do more condition. Because like my breathing started getting compromised. Then I started getting an elevated heart rate. Like this last time I had a mass that was growing on this left side of my clavicle. It had caused, because every time what happens is always fluid on this right lung starts to pool. So fluid was in my right lung, and then the mass was growing outward, but also inward. It was pushing on my trachea, pushing it over. So like I wasn't, you asked my wife, like it was difficult. Like she was having to sleep on the couch because I was snoring so loud. And a lot of times waking up because it was literally like I was being half choked. And then my right lung was basically slowly again, not working. And then that was putting extra pressure on my heart. Like my heart rate was like a 140 over 120. And usually it's like 100 or 90 over like 60, you know what I mean? So it's like, so it's been a wild 2 years, and like the first almost year and a half. So basically till this January of this year, I was working out like still like maxing, like still lifting heavy. And then it just got to the point where I was like, you know what? Like the chemo is about to get harder. Even before the stem cell, like we did like really hard chemo. And I was just like, I'm not getting as much as I can out of chemo because I'm not recovering from it from working out. And I don't think I'm getting really much out of the workouts and training because I can't recover because of chemo. So it's like, I was like, you know what? The working out is just sitting in that chair and taking the poison into my vein, So this past, like up until almost 6 months now, I haven't been training, So like I did yoga for the first workout I've done since literally like December. like 2 days ago. And next week I'm going to start working out at home, until I can get back into the gym. So it's been a lot of frustration. I'll tell you one thing: you learn who your true friends are. Um, I've had a lot of people. It's funny, like that I was just kind to in my life that donated to my GoFundMe page, and I know people that look at my stories every day that I've known since high school that have not. And it's funny how that is. And it's the worst part is I'm not religious. I'm more spiritual, but it sucks how many people will send prayers but will not help me out financially. And the thing is probably the hardest part about being in America. We have the best doctors, you have the quickest access to pills, and we have the harshest financial burden when it comes to you get sick though. So when you're a person that is in a customer service type thing with a coaching, it's like if I don't work in person, I don't make money for the most part. But at the same time, it's been blessings because it made me finally start my website. It made me go harder and learn more about social media. Um, and it got me out of where I was working at before, the rack. It finally got me working independently. And it's like I work maybe a third of what I do to make a lot more. And it was like I was never like the whole thing is that like everybody knows I talk about all the time with my clients and everything. My whole goal is to own my own gym. Never been hiding that. I that was a discussion with me and the old owner, and that eventually became a problem. I mean, that's a common thing, I think, but when cancer came around, things just got worse. And so I knew it was time for me to step away. And so it's like there has been blessings within it. There's some things where I'm like, oh, that's a lesson I learned. Like I got into meditation, something I always wanted to do, something my wife always told me to do, and I never did. And then now it's like, whoa, I see all the benefits. So there's certain things where I'm like, oh, this is making me a better coach long term. It's like, oh, you know what? I think I am going to go back to school and finish my degree. It's little things where it's like, despite it sucking as much as it did, it could be much worse because there's people with worse diagnoses that I had, little kids, some people with inoperable tumors, stuff like that. But there's so many lessons that I learned that are for me and for the people I coach. So there was good and bad. That's how I look at it. You know.
And that was what I was going to ask. How has this changed your perspective on how you handle your clients?
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's one of the things where, in one perspective, it's that oh, you have a cold today. Guess what? I've worked the day after I've done chemo treatments. I don't want to hear it. I've sat on a hard box coaching people while I literally felt like I was gonna puke the entire time. So like, it's always like I think Dave Tate talks about like what's the most difficult thing. Well, it's whatever the most difficult thing is to you at the time. And like when I used to think like having the flu was bad, it's like it's a whole different ball game. And so I have a story that I think helps people that may come from technically just an easier life, as an athlete or as even Gen Pop people that I train. And they know a lot of them that are my clients that are still been sticking with me the entire time because my wife's a trainer too and a nutritionist. So a lot of my in-person people have been training with her. So it's like when they have a bad day or they're tired, they're like, I know what Kalil going through. So it helps in that aspect. I definitely will say I knew about meditation. I think that's huge. So that's something I definitely recommend to my clients. And there's so many ways to do it. There's no right or wrong way. It's like whatever's the best for you, just like we know with training. So I think that's a big time thing. And my wife is studying right now for two different masters, one for a sports nutritionist and one for a sports psychologist. So the mental side of things is so powerful that I've learned because it was so easy that at times I would feel really down. And then it would be like when I would do stuff that I knew was good for my mental, it was like quickly I could come back up. And it's like, wow, that's things that you should just do in your regular life with normal stress, because it's just hard sometimes to put things in perspective. When it feels like, oh, this sucks, it sucks. And it's like, you know what? You're not dead, are you? This could be worse. There's people with worse outcomes, or it's only going to suck for a little bit. You're going to get through it. You're going to go to the other side. So mostly stuff like that. It's been really hard because of just the fatigue that you get. I would say probably up until a few months ago, really got into like going back to like self-educating when it comes to just actually the training side. But because I had to switch my focus so much online, I have grown as an online coach. Like the amount of detail I've just discovered just from messing around with it, how to put into the programs to make it as close as I can to being in person. That has made me grow in that form. So my online people, because I have a lot of like overseas basketball guys that I train, and just my college kids when they go away. It's like, hey, now I'm making it where it's like this seems a little bit more seamless when we go from in person to online. So I think that's probably the major changes.
And that's something I'm kind of working through myself. So I've got some kids that are off at college and they're not coming home for the summer because of jobs or whatnot. So
Right.
trying to build something online for them. So they have a training library, they have the program, they can look at their metrics.
Mhm.
It takes a ton of work and some pretty smart guys to
Yes.
help you out.
Yes. Yeah. And it's like I use the Squarespace for my website. And even with like, AI, and you get that kind of like it's just like a here, you fill in the blanks kind of deal. It's still like, oh, I want to have this on my website. Okay, this is gonna take you a few weeks just to get this done where it actually looks like you want to. And it's just so funny. I'm like, wow, I really, you can really appreciate people who make a website from scratch with coding and everything. It's like, Jesus, I got at least a slideshow outline there, where I can plug and play. But like, it was just funny, figuring out how to put the video of one of my athletes lifting is on the cover page, basically of the website. When you first, it says like, welcome to Revenant's coaching. And it's like him, and he's walked, you don't know how many days it took me to figure out how to get that video to get on there instead of just like a picture. Like, it's stuff like that. But yeah, like the next thing I'm gonna do is like me and my wife want to do is have an app. Like but right now we're just doing is filming exercise, so we have our exercise library kind of already done. But it does help because it's like, yeah, when you have to send people to a million different YouTube videos, then you got to spend the time to watch the YouTube video, make sure they don't say something that's not, because like even if it's like tricep extension, if they're just kind of going through it and you wrote a tempo, the person may watch the video, ignore the tempo you wrote, and then it's like, oh, now they're not doing exactly what I want because next cycle we're not going to use that tempo. It's like, so it's little stuff like that. Like, yeah, it does take so much time to like build that thing, and I think that's why a lot of people, it's like if they do have a certain amount of clients, I'm like, you have 100 something people and they're all their stuff is individualized. You said. I don't freaking believe it. Unless you're writing crappy programs, you know what I mean? Like it's just like it's like it takes so much time with each person, if you're really doing a good job. Yeah.
So let's get into some training stuff. We've covered
Yeah.
some of the other stuff, but I listened to some of your podcasts. I listened to with Brandon Byrd. I listened to with Sweet Burns, a couple of others. They were pretty good. I listened to one with Jacob Pence. That one was really
Okay.
good. You guys got deep into Barry Ross and Matt
Yeah.
specific. That was a really good podcast. But run up jumps or step in jumps versus static jumps. What will you kind of program? What are you kind of looking at?
I think like for everyone, I do a mixture of jumps, and it just depends on the sport which ones we'll focus on, like for majority of the year. So like let's say it's my basketball player, I may do stuff like a drop step. If you're just familiar with basketball, like I may do a drop step for the big man, but for a guard, when they gonna do that? They're not. So like, do I need to work on that box jump variation? Not really. You know what I mean? So there are some where it's like, oh, we're addressing a weakness that you have, but there are some where it's like, this is like, I think the jump variations is the biggest amount of sport specific time I do. So it's like my football players, my baseball players, my jujitsu people, broad jump is going to be more important to me for you probably than your vertical. I mean, my football players, they'll kind of do both, but my basketball players, I could care less really about their broad jump. I'll also tell you this because most basketball players have the patella pain almost always. They hate doing broad jumps. I remember when I used to do them, I always be like, thank God this is once every few months that we're really just testing it. But like a lot of my like baseball or football people, I'll do a lot of variations of the broad jump. You know what I mean? Because they need to. Like a running box jump, like you said, I definitely would do that with the basketball players. And I'll do stuff like have a med ball in the chest, have a med ball on the shoulder. Maybe you have to take a few steps, or you even do a running one, but the ball's above your head. or sometimes you get to build up and go up above the head. And then if they're a guard, a lot of vertical, usually the dump. So I'll do like a lot of Jared with them. Almost everybody, though, I'll tell you this, does do on, because I have a jump mat, will do dumbbell jumps and some unweighted jumps. It's just that some people do that twice a week, and some people have another day where they're doing like box jump or broad jump variations. So it really just depends on like age, what sport they play, and if they're in or out of season. Like if they're out of season, more variation. If they're in season or they're close to like if we got 12 weeks to a tryout. Okay, well, we're going to focus more on your whatever you're going to test. So like my volleyball girls, I don't really care about their no step vertical because at their combine, they don't do it. They do the 3 or 4 step approach. So like we're going to work on that if I have a Vertex, So, or even on the mat, because that's what they got to do. I could care less about really anything else. So, that's kind of, I bet you that's your standard kind of answer that you get, it's really just time of year and then what sport they play. Yeah.
So you kind of touched on it there a minute ago, Vertex versus jump mat.
Yeah.
Which, when will you rotate one in over the other? Is the Vertex better for more of an approach jump and the jump mat better for weighted jumps? What are you kind of looking at there?
Well, I think the best weighted jumps are the dumbbell, and I think the mat out of box jumps, Vertex, or jump mat. Obviously, with the Vertex, you can't even do it. So that's why I'd say if I had to pick one, I would always do jump mat, especially because box jumps, some kids are going to suck at it just because they never overcome the fear of it. Vertex, it's slow to set up, and because you can't do the dumbbell jumps. And like the king of the vertical, I think, has been Jared and Byrd, and I think the use of the jump mat is huge. So I always say I think the training is important to have the jump mat. If they're doing basketball or volleyball, the Vertex is extremely important. And especially for when they got to practice their approach. Because what happens on the jump mat, a lot of times what happens is you take away the vertical because the kid has to kind of slow their momentum or do an extremely hard stop to go up and not drift off the mat, number one, which doesn't count, or they're drifting down as they're drifting, which is taking away their vertical, right? And if a person has to test their approach in volleyball and basketball, every time they run the jump, they're using their arm and going like that. So it feels natural on the Vertex. So the real key is to have both. Like you need to have both. But like when I was at the rack, we had both. I was still using the jump mat probably 90% of the time. It was that 10% where they getting close to school, they got to retest or go into a combine. I start using it a lot more, right? Because also the thing is that you can be natural. Most of the time the kids are naturally going to be good at the Vertex, but they're not going to be naturally good at the jump mat. So a lot of times if we improve on the jump mat, we know we usually improve on the Vertex. Unless the kid is like goofy or they never have done it before. Typically, if they've done it a few times, like a lot of my volleyball girls, every time they go to a combine or a camp, even when they're in high school, they've done the Vertex a few times, at least. And the basketball kids too. It's usually training kids to jump on the jump mat, like really be, because I think it's all about power. I think Jared explained it once in one of his podcasts about the difference of how you have to jump on a jump mat versus a Vertex. So I think it's important to do both. Like Byrd does a million variations, as you know, talking to him. So I think you got all your bases covered. He's not going to favor really one. I know a lot of times he says sometimes just with the kids that are just not confident with the boxing, that's the one where he'll kind of avoid, and just say, well, do which one you like, But I definitely would say the jump mat is more for training. I think the Vertex is more preparing for testing. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I'm not talking to basketball guys. I'm not a basketball guy. It's not something I did a whole lot of. I know you're very passionate about it, but once you kind of can get a kid dunking, how important does their vertical become after that?
It depends. And this is the problem with, I think, volleyball and basketball. Like the volleyball girls will be like, oh, we got to get to the 10-foot club. How impressive is 10 foot if you're the 5'8" girl that is the setter that touches 10 feet compared to the 6'6" girl? One person has to have a 30-inch vertical. One person has a 21-inch vertical. The average volleyball D1 athlete is between 21 to about 23, I think, inches. That's because most of them are 6 foot or above, right? So if you're a short girl that can hit that 10 foot, it's way more impressive. So the same thing with basketball players, like a guard that can dunk versus a 7-footer. most 7-footers don't even have to jump literally to dunk a ball. I've seen it. Like they can literally just reach on their tippy toes and just go like that. So it depends on their style of game. Like his style of game is all ground. Averages 30 and doesn't really dunk. Like he can dunk with two hands only because of his height. Pretty sure he has probably between like a 24, 27-inch vertical. If he was like 6 foot under, he probably couldn't even dunk with one hand. But at his height at 6'7", and how successful he is, and being that his game literally is what most players get to at an older age, he's going to age gracefully playing the exact same way. So if I was a strength coach, yes, we would want to raise his vertical, but I'd probably focus him more on pure strength and mobility to make sure he doesn't get hurt. And the vertical will come as it comes. But I wouldn't be hammering 2 times a week, knowing that he's doing 1,000 shots, maybe even twice a day if he has a shooting machine or with his friends. Because most people don't know with the shooting machines now, you can get 500 shots in like 30, 45 minutes. And these guys are pros. So you best believe they have one at their house. And when they go to the gym, they got 3 rebounds. So like they're putting already a lot of jumping on their body. Even if it's low level, as you know, that shit adds up. So it's like, how much can I, it depends on the age of the basketball player, I think, more than anything, because by the time they're midway through college or they're in their pros, they've already had major knee or ankle if they're probably a guard. The bigs, sometimes they have like back or shoulder, so it's like, you got to be careful, like how much you can push at that point compared to a lot of them because they haven't lifted weights in their week. You get them strong, they will stop getting hurt as much. That's number one. Sometimes because of that, their vertical also goes up. And then it's like, if you're training them online, at best they have box jumps available, and most of them, because they got tight ass hips and long legs, it's hard for them to be good at box jumping. That's why with them, the jump mat is so big, because I can do everything weighted on there. And I don't have to, if I have a bunch of kids or whatever, or athletes, I don't have to, move up and down the vertical. And we eliminate that fear of tripping on the box jump part. So like with basketball players, it's really like, how old are they? If they're a high school kid, hell yeah, your vertical can't be too high, because guess what? At the combine, it gets higher and higher every year. So don't assume, hey, I got a 38, I got a 40, I'm good. Some kid may he may get a 43. And if we're talking like the big time players, maybe that's the difference between you being number 15 and you being number 3 and being a lottery pick. And we're talking money versus guaranteed money versus 3 years guaranteed of guaranteed money. Shoe deals already kind of coming, like, you know what I mean? So it's like you want to milk that. But once they're in college and stuff, you got to start being careful, because they're already a population, just like baseball. You mess them up, or you get them a little too sore when you first start with them, they're gonna be like, see, I can't do this lift shit. It's throw it off my shot, it's throw it off my throw. You gotta I think you gotta gain their trust a lot of time, because that community still thinks it's stunting your growth if you don't start later than 17 or whatever.
That actually paves the way for my next question. So working with some of these guys, you start putting a little size on them. That's the first thing you hear. Well, if you get them too big, they won't be able to jump.
Yeah,
we've tried that out here, and we've hung weight vests on them and stuff like that, and I think we've had 30 pounds on a kid before we ever saw a decrease in their vertical. And that's weight that's not helping them. That's just hanging weight. I wondered what your thought was on that. I don't feel like it has that much bearing on it, but are those guys right? Or are they just still living in the past?
It's like, and that's a problem when you're just not educated. It's like, you could be technically kind of partially right on their side, where it's like, okay, how tall am I? Let me look at the players that generally play my position. And if we're talking about my goals to play at the highest level, let me look there. Let me look at who lasts the longest, weighing that, whatever the weight is, at my position that I'm going to play. So a 7-footer can weigh between 250 and 280 and still be very in shape if they have a good amount of muscle. But for a guard, that could be between 6'1" to about 6'4", like if they're playing point, there's a range. There's a range of guys where it's like, you got John Morant that weighs 170 something. Now he jumps like 45 inches, I don't know how much more weight we want to put on. And then you have Russell Westbrook, who weighs like 215, 220. They're the same damn height. They play the same damn position. And you look at their body type, though, you see a lot more mass on Russell. And Ja kind of looks like he's still in high school. But Ja just got paid 200 something million on the court, going to get another 50 something off the court because he's lightning quick and he can jump extremely high. And Westbrook was kind of the same, but it's like, but they play a little different style. But it's like, all right, every time John Moran falls, he looks like he's breaking in pieces, So longevity wise, will that kind of hurt him being that light? Like he ain't got no cushion. Like, some dudes when they land on their butt, it just goes to tailbone and they're out for 3 weeks. Sometimes that helps you as you're falling on hardwood, it's not the contact of football, but there's still, you see like, well, you're playing 80 games now. You're jumping from 20 something in high school, 20 something in college. Now you got to play 80. Every guard that you guard every night is extremely fast. If you're guarding Steph, you're going to run a marathon. And then if you're good, and then the next day you guard in Westbrook, you're taking elbows in the ribs. So sometimes a little extra cushion for some guys works out better. And some guys, they do stay light. I think it's very person to person. And I think you need, that's where those good nutritionists come in handy. With good teams have them because, or some guys have their individual person because it's like, hey, if I put 5 pounds over these next 5 months, my vertical goes up. Clearly, I could use the extra weight, and my squat went up another 50 pounds because I've been working with my strength coach. Well, let's see if my body, if there's no resistance, like your body will tell you. I think especially by a certain age, this is where I like to hover around, and you could see. When you start gaining that weight, okay, when I go play, how do I feel? Like, am I less conditioned because I just need to up my conditioning? Or is this extra weight like I really feel bugged down? Or did I add this extra weight and I'm jumping higher? I'm snapping that ball on my passes. I feel like I have more control. I'm shooting a little deeper. All that is very person dependent. I think there's never, and we know this, it is always person dependent with like any of these questions. And there's too much of the, the old stigma of, it's going to stunt your growth or it's going to slow you down or it throws off your shot. I know a lot of strength coaches that talk about how they made the kids sore their first day in the weight room and they missed some 3-pointers in practice. And the coach is like, comes in the weight room the next day. He's like, you guys can't be doing this stuff. They're too sore, and it's like, hey, it's a new stimulus. When you made them run 1,000 suicides, they were fucking sore too and couldn't run that well the next day. They eventually got used to it. Now, should they be getting used to that? Probably not. But, it's a new thing. So especially for a lot of the guys that never lifted maybe till they got to college, yeah, it's going to throw off your shot the first day. It's sore. If I do 100 push-ups right now, I don't care how much I'm used to it, and I go try to shoot, it's going to throw off my shot. But long term, we know the benefit of it. Like when I started lifting, passing, dribbling, and shooting from farther became easier from lifting. But I think it's also because they want those immediate results. And unlike the latter, it will make you sore sometimes at first. And, I think it's just hard because, just like every sport, you're battling parents and coaches, but both of them are believing and coming even sometimes to you with those same beliefs that are just ingrained. They still hear Allen Iverson say the weights were too big, or they were too heavy or whatever.
Well, what kind of made me think about this a little bit was watching The Last Dance. And if you see how much bigger Jordan and Rodman and Pippen were at the end of their career, from the beginning, at some point in there, they found weights. At some point in there, they found strength and conditioning, and it lengthened their career, I would imagine they would say, and helped them win more championships. So, I understand a real tall population is hard to train with the conventional stuff that we do with smaller guys, but finding a way to get around that and make it accessible for them. As a guy that played basketball, I'm sure you understand how important that is for a coach.
Yeah, that's where, stuff like, especially when they first start, like they're worried about a bar in their back. Number two, they probably can't put a bar in their back. The form is going to be crap, especially the tall they are. If you have the money, you have the space. I'm telling you, the best freaking invention for that, so you could get them doing the most important exercise for jumping, is a belt squat. Now you can still squat them. There's no bar in your back until you start trusting me, until your form gets better. And, some of them come with a box already built in. If not, you can park a bench, whatever, but some of them you could put bands on, or you can add change, and then you can still squat them. And with a lot of the taller guys, I usually will start them. And, most athletes now, I kind of all start them on trap bar deadlifts. And when I'm even warming them up to see kind of what a heavy 5 looks like, if I see form is crap, because when we get to a certain range of motion, I'll put a block down. I'll put another block down. I don't care if we start at an 8, 10-inch block. I mean, because you got to think a 7-foot guy, when you watch them, it's funny. Like I explained this, I'm like, watch them on a 10-inch block. That's the same height you start at, 5'10" kid. It's the same height of his shins. Before he was on a 5-inch deficit starting out, right? So like for him, it's like the goal is to be able to get to a certain depth. For me, like I don't care about my athletes doing ass to grass free squats or having to be to like get to a deficit, be to do a deficit deadlift for good form. But I want them to be able to, let's say, without any weight, ass to grass squat, because their mobility's okay with that. So they don't blow out their groin getting down to get that ball. You don't want to be the big that's like, I get a little low and I'm like, I hope a guard gets, you know what I mean? Or same thing with that old lineman where you see like, he can't really get into position. Well, he's tight, he's immobile. There's a lot of his hamstrings, glutes, and adducts are all weak. So it's like without weight, I want that. But it's like, okay, when we first start them out, I want them to get strong quick. And I needed to be safe. So it's like belt squat them, high rack pulls, high block pulls, probably football bar benching with the heavy stuff, probably straight bar benching for high reps and working on technique. And what I kind of do is I start reversing it. That's kind of what I do we go through a whole program, but that's kind of what I do, where then it becomes, now the football bar is your second exercise, not your first. The straight bar is obviously in season. It becomes more push-ups, dumbbells, and football bar press for those guys anyway. But it's like, hey, in the off season, at least it's like, hey, I trust this guy to do a 3-rep max with a straight bar, and I know he can press over to something, and he's not going to blow his shoulder out. You know what I mean? And second, I can trust him, especially if it's online. When I say leave 10 to 20 in the tank, he's going to leave 10 to 20 in the tank. You know what I mean? So it's like, hey, if I say push-ups by max, the worst you're going to do is just make yourself a little too sore. But certain guys, they got an ego. I know they work out of an LA Fitness gym. They got to try out in a few days. And I say, we're doing a 5 RM, but it's like, we're not even trying to beat her all the time. If they're the guy that's going to go for the max anyway, I may not even have to do that exercise. It's like, hey, we're going to do a Z press with dumbbells, because I know you're going to be done at 40s. So it's like, I think just with those guys, it's just with the taller guys, until you get buy-in and fix some mobility and weaknesses and technique, it's just everything is shorter range of motion, heavy wise, while you work on the technique with the lighter weights. Yeah.
Now, if you could go back into your career and fix a few things to make it to the next level, what do you see looking back that you needed to have better?
Okay, so that's, talk about this all the time. Like with me, it's like, okay, first, I wish I didn't start off. I did mostly like bodybuilding, basically style with my lifting. And I think it made me a great powerlifting coach, because I can get through to these guys when it comes to their secondary exercises and stuff like that, hey, you need the mind muscle connection. Even with the kids, I think the best thing I am technique wise is all single joint exercises. Like, because my parents both were trainers and they both did bodybuilding. So that's why my start was like that. So I would change that more than anything else, that I wouldn't have done it at least as long, but I would have started heavy weights earlier and straight bar benching. I would have started deadlifting, squatting, all that, and putting an emphasis on that and max effort jumping and sprinting. And then less long distance conditioning. Like I was always a guy that could do, I do 5 practices a day, but I'm going to not be the fastest. I'm going to be, there's 1, 2, 3. I'm the 4th fastest guy. I'm also the 6th, 7th, 8th highest jumper. And that's a problem when you're 5'10", right? So it's like, I would have replaced a lot of the bodybuilding stuff with more heavy work, obviously, like I do with my kids, more jumping and sprinting, but not for a million reps. It would have been 2, 3 sprints. You're going for a max, whether it's box jump or whatever. And just less hypertrophy work, because I was bigger than I needed to be, especially at my size. Like that, like 5'10", I should have. Like I graduated, and I wasn't like heavy. I was probably like 170 something. But by my sophomore or junior year, I was like 200, 205. It's like should not have been that heavy that quick. Like by the time I was playing semi-pro, I had lost. I went down from 220 to 197. My wife helped me with my diet and everything, and I was lean, but like I was faster than I ever was because that's also when I was doing conjugate fully. My sophomore year of college, I had started reading about Westside, so that's when I started switching. But I didn't start till I was 21. When I look back, it's like I have kids that I train that are half the genetic potential I had, literally work out half as what I do. And because they're with me 3 days a week, I've seen a 20 go to a 30-inch vertical every time. And 30 is the best I ever got because I think I just had so much slow twitch that was developed. It's just hard. You know what I mean? Like you're beating a dead horse. And then on top of everything, I was already short, already being 5'10", so like D2 was kind of like almost the ceiling for me. Like I got there mostly off of grit. Like I was always the best defender on every team I had. Like my dad's from Chicago. That's like kind of the thing we do. And I was at least strong. So like I could guard a lot of times 1 through 3, even though I was only the height of a 1, so, I think that was some of the changes I would have made. Definitely would have had a better diet. Like now that I know so much just from being married to a person that knows so much about diet, like I'm like, oh my God. Like every time she tells me like, oh, like, let me tell you about this, how this can influence all of, talking all the way down to the cellular level. And I'm like, I was nowhere doing anywhere close to that. And it's like, not so much would I've gained another inch or two on height, but more so would I have recovered faster, which means I would have made more gains. Would I've been hydrated more? Hell to the yeah. Would I've been able to just develop more speed and because I'm recovering from the workouts, maybe I would have been even faster. It's all that type of stuff. And then probably one of the biggest things that I try to stress to my kids, I think when I was in high school, that's when Netflix was a big thing. 5 hours to 8 hours of sleep is a big deal. When you do that for like 3 years like that's a big deal. So those are the things I would change. Yeah.
So having that conversation with athletes, getting them to understand what piece is missing without just always saying, well, back when I played or, I used to, they do get tired of hearing that. So how do you give them that piece of information without it just sounding like an old man, yelling at an athlete?
You know what I do is I tell them how much better I could have been if I did this. Like, yeah, I know exactly. Hey, are you doing those ladders, right? Right. I was just as slow as you were. And that's why I played D2. I think it's not, don't do the back in my day because I'm like, I don't remember seeing you on NBA TV. Right. So like if you're a coach that, you played college, couldn't go to the pros, something obviously went wrong. So instead of coming from like all the things you did right, I look for those opportunities to kind of humble myself first in the conversation. And then they're more likely to listen instead of it's like, I know everything, because I'll tell them like, hey, I did those same things you did, and here are the results. And then I have athletes that are much older than you that were doing the same thing, listen to me for a few years, and now they're better than they were at your age. That usually doesn't happen. That's not supposed to happen, right? But we change the way they train. It's more efficient. It's always like you tell those Gen Pop clients, you could lift more, do way less cardio, which is going to be fun, eat more, but eat the right stuff, and you'll actually lose more weight that way. And it's funny when people hear, they're like, wait, that sounds a lot better. But most of the time you don't know that. Oh, you don't need to run 3 miles to be good at basketball. What's your 40 time? What's your 20-yard sprint, which is probably 80% of the damn game? What's your 5-10-5? Because that's all you damn do. That's way more important than how fast your mile time is. And guess what? Which one is more fun to train? Which one is more recoverable? Which one, on top of playing a game that is 3 miles already, is going to not beat up your knees more? Sounds better, right? Boom. And then the hardest thing with basketball, especially because those guys make so much more money, they're even more secretive. So it's hard. You want to try to find the examples of guys at that level doing the right things. I think it's becoming more common at the college level, which I think that's kind of the process of it. But you see more guys that, number one, are at least lifting. But number two, like they're lifting heavy. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the biggest things with basketball is like be afraid of lifting one, but lifting heavy. Because most of the time those guys are doing so much jumping, they don't need a lot of times so much more jump. Like their biggest missing chunk, it's like, hey, you can't squat 135 well, and you weigh 180 to 240. That's your biggest issue. Like we can't even get that. I don't even know how strong you are because your mobility, you can't even get down to parallel, right? Even on a box, So I mean, your hamstrings just aren't even doing anything. It's all quads right now. What happened? Like some of them, it's like, bro, just bring up their single joint strength. You got an inverse curl, you got single leg hamstring, you got a 45-degree hyper, reverse hyper. A lot of times their backs are nothing. Let me tell you, basketball players, a lot of times, it's funny, as much as we love their shoulders, like are they love and obsessed with shoulders because they just bench it. If they're lifting, a lot of times all bench, their rear, you ask them to do 30 band tears with a freaking skinny red band, even though they weigh 200 pounds. They can't do it for more than like 30 reps. You know what I mean? It's like their rear delts, their posterior chain from top to bottom is all lacking. It's like so many of them is like you can just look at them and be like, yep, bring that muscle group up, bring that muscle group up. Easy.
So sled work. I heard you and Byrd. You got into a little bit of sled work. You were talking about that. We try to add in as much as we can. But do you mix in heavy and light, or are you looking for something in particular out of your sled work?
Yeah, it just depends on the sport. So like my football players, especially if they're, not a wide receiver or anything, I would do more heavy trips. I think if they're O-line and they're closer to in season, like you can get a little bit more specific. That's where you would do a lot of prowler. You know what I mean? And it depends on how out of shape the kid is. Like if I have a kid that's fast and is conditioned, why am I using it? Like, why am I focusing on the sled? He probably just needs to be stronger. You know what I mean? So it's like, you got that little chubby high school kid. It's like, all right, you got at least one day a week where you're going to do some trips of sled. And sometimes or ATP marching. So like that's probably my favorite because sometimes the kids, they take forever to get used to like upright, strike with the heel first, make the thing click the entire time. Some of them that takes a while. That belt squat, you want it short with heavy weight or longer with lighter weight, it's pretty easy to teach. It's like, okay, I want high knees here, or I want low and wide here, or I want straight leg kicking to the side. Like it's pretty easy. So I kind of actually favor that over, especially because then we're getting traction on the spine. But like, like with like a lot of basketball players, most of the time I'll do, as long as we have the space, 60 meters, 120, and then sometimes up to like 240 without rest, and then the trips obviously are going down as we go higher. But I think my favorite thing, especially the younger they are, to kind of keep them with pace and not worry about the rest time being crap. I think a lot of times I utilize a lot of giant sets. That's my favorite thing. So let's not spend that extra maybe 10 to 20 minutes it takes setting up everything, breaking it down, checking your phone. How about I just make these last 5 things back to back to back to back to back for 3 or 4 sets? So we'll sled walk, we'll reverse hyper, banded hamstring curl, banded good mornings, and just go right back to the sled. That I think can get them even more in shape because, especially with a sport like basketball where it's nonstop, and your arms are going to get tired, your legs are going to get tired, your abs may break down. You may not be to keep your posture and defense. Like that means it kind of becomes like you can do full body in that giant circuit, even if you want, like, especially if it's a kid that's coming twice a week, So I think sometimes with them, pure sled work is not so much, but with like a sport like football, especially when we can get real specific, like, hey, how many plays do you play? A thing. And then you, depending on your position, and we know you're almost never getting this many yards. So it's like 4 sets of 40, 4 sets of 60 meters, or 6 sets of 60, like that can get pretty standard. I think baseball is like, we're going to do a lot of like the cross over the leg because that's when you actually kind of run. But we're going to do a lot more heavier ended stuff with those 2 sports. Volleyball, I don't really do much of because a lot of times with them, they are extremely weak. That's their really only problem. And they do jumping, but they never do anything with maximal intent. So with them, like, I don't really waste time. Like, they do a belt squat march, it's 3 by 1 minute. Let's work up to at least being able to do your body weight or more, but a lot of them weigh 140 and can't squat 70 pounds. without it looking like shit. Like with them, a lot of times, even my college girls, it's a lot of times like we just need to get you strong, especially because I have girls that go to universities and they don't lift heavy. So it's like when they come to me, it's like, I'm going to do that with you. I'll let them do Bulgarians with a 20-second tempo. When you go back, we're going to squat, bench, and deadlift. You know what I mean? So it's like, again, it just depends on the sport. And if the kid actually needs to, like, is he really out of shape or does he just have a bunch of weak muscles and we just need to raise those up?
Well, I know you're a Westside guy, and Louis was big on the sled work and for power
Yeah.
production and loading the sled up, and he loaded up pretty heavy. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
everything was a lot more walking than running, but
Mm-hmm.
helping athletes figure out how to get into the ground and really push, and like you said, make that sled click.
Yeah, I like it with like us like if I'm being like to get even like I like it with my older, more experienced athletes. They get a lot more out of it. They're more honest with how much weight they should use. Because the worst part is like make it click. You turn around, they added the plate because they said it's easy, and I'm like, you're doing it wrong when I came back, but now you've already done 6 sets. That's where it's like the older kid I can trust. Boom, you know what I mean? That's where it's like those are the type of populations that I would use it with more, and track probably.
Now, do you find as you start getting that posterior chain stronger that maybe the quads lose a little bit of focus in there somewhere, and you got to kind of come back and build them back up?
Yeah, that's something that I think when I first started out was kind of going like West Side, and then I was like, and I was focused so much on the kids' posterior chain because yes, almost like Louis said, most of the kids you get, most of the athletes you get, that is their problem. But I think you don't want, unlike I think unlike powerlifting or something like that. You know how he always does like your weakness becomes your strength, your strength becomes your weakness. Well, isn't that similar to linear saying we're going to go away from conditioning and hope it just stays with us? So it's like I feel like that's what I was doing in the beginning, and then it's like I'm like, wait a minute. Well, these kids can jump so high with just having quads. I don't want to go so far away from it, and then they lose strength there. So I think it's always the balance of doing both, and I think that's why now I've kind of included doing MSM, so mechanically similar movements, from Sweet. I do that in for their lower bodies and their upper, but especially if they're squatting, I make sure whether they're box squatting or belt squatting, whatever, that they'll do another free squat after, which almost always pumps up their quads. And then we're working on free squat technique, but I'll also add tempo in there. And then obviously just a lot of single leg work in the form of lunges or Bulgarian split squats or something like that to get the quads firing. And even sometimes I like for a while I was doing leg press and I was like, wait a minute, this is an easy way where they can't really get hurt. It's hard to mess up and it'll pump up their quads. I pretty much do anything and everything except sissy squats and leg extensions with most of my athletes. My pro athletes, they're in a hotel gym, they're traveling. Yeah, we do some leg extensions. You know what I mean? But like my kids, like, no, I stay away from that because I know it'll turn into 150 on the cable stack and doing ACL tears instead of quad extensions. Yeah.
Do you do much heel elevated work?
I do, and it's like I do it in two forms. It's like the kid that doesn't have, obviously most of them are never going to have Olympic lifting shoes, and they can't get down in their squat like a heel. Like we're doing a heel squat as the secondary movement. But sometimes I make them elevate their shoes. Like even I'll do it with myself, even if they don't, to make your quads work even more. And then sometimes I'll do heel elevated, like let's say like a split lunge, like the Poliquin split lunge or something. If they can't do it with their heel on the ground. Um, yeah, so that's I would say that's pretty much it. Like a lot of times for secondary work, um, and then for like that mobility aspect of doing like because also he has the step downs that you do too, where the foot's higher, and then the other one you have the back leg straight, and then you're touching down nice and controlled. So then I sometimes kids got to start off with that heel raise and they go down, and then you can elevate the toe, I believe is the last one. So like that, not a whole bunch, but a little bit. I've definitely started implementing that because of the quad, but also I noticed the ankle too. So I think just doing box squats, the ankles can get kind of stiff. And if the ankles get stiff, I think you start losing function in the foot, and that's never good. So yeah.
That was kind of how we stumbled on it, was, trying to work on ankles and feet. And then when we started doing it, the lifts were so weak compared to our standard lifts. So I'm like, well, I don't think there should be that much difference in these lifts. So we started putting it in. Now, you talked about that a minute ago. As athletes get tired, basketball players, that's kind of where we were talking, but all athletes in general, they lose that posture. So creating that strong posture through lifts, especially that upright position, like, zerkers or deadlifts or whatever it takes. How are you looking to create that strong posture that'll last the full game?
I think that's where on your upper body days, you want to work a lot of strength endurance. So I love giant sets or ascending sets with the upper body. So one of my favorites at my old coach, Joe Lasco, he used to do the stats at Westside. He was the guy. Did you ever watch the old jumping video from the Westside? That's him with the ponytail. That's it. So he goes by Special Strengths on Instagram. Definitely a good follow. If you like, because he was there for like 15 years. So like, you want to send an athlete like how to do some reverse hypers, he's got some great ones on his. We'll work with it, because now his gym is literally like right around the corner from where the old Westside is. So like one of my favorites that I took from him that he had me do, and I'm telling you, I could not. It helped so much with not being to drop my hands or just my shoulders and everything when I get tired from shooting. It was a TRX giant set. So I would do like eyes, Ys, Ts, rows, tricep extension, let's say, and then right back. I'm telling you, you do that, you start getting used to that, and almost kind of the same deal, but do it while walking with a sled, stuff like that. Or like, you could do an ascending set of doing like front raises, side raises, upright rows, band tear, pull down, tricep extension, and stuff like that. So it's like, I think on the upper body day involving that strength endurance, because especially if they are already strong, you can do, your bench, 1-2 strength emphasize exercise, and then go right to a giant set and get them in and out, still probably in 45 minutes to an hour. On the lower body day, I think that's where the Zerchers come in. A lot of front squatting. I think the front squatting is the biggest, because once they get not rounding their upper body with significant more weight than when they started, you'll see a big improvement there, maximal. And I think on the strength endurance side, you work that on the upper body day. Yeah. I mean, you could do stuff like maybe like marching the ATP, but loop a band around and have them holding the face full statically. A lot of static work is huge, I think. And even on the reverse hyper, one of my favorites that my clients hate is a reverse hyper ISO holds for time. Or on the GHD ISO hold for time, a 45 degree, whatever you got access to, you get that full body. You're going to get everything in that 15, 30-second usual range. Sometimes with let's say maybe like a swimmer that's got to have a lot of static ISO strength in that back, or maybe a wrestler, maybe 45 seconds to a minute. Maybe you mimic whatever event that they have and how long they got to last, or you see when they actually break down, and then you can dictate how many sets you want to do. But stuff like that, I think, is where it's used. Strength endurance on the upper body, maximal strength in the form of front squats, Zerchers, and then maybe specialty exercises. You change from reps and sets, or regular reps, to ISOs for time. Yeah.
It seems like the further I get into this, the more you notice, because you're around athletes all the time, and getting a few sprinters out here, and that's one of the first things I see is their inability to hold a posture. Now, whether you gain that isometrically or through weights or both, however you get it. But those kids don't understand how important that is, to be able to keep that back straight and stay up in their chest. And sometimes that's a long road to build that with today's youth.
Yeah, and I think it's also probably too from, like everybody complains about now, is like a lot of kids specialize too early, don't play multiple sports, and then you still have certain sports where the weight room's either done wrong, too late, right? So it's just like, that combo is hard, and it's like, yeah, I think you see a lot of no glutes in athletes, and maybe that's from sitting so much, bad posture, weak upper back and stuff from sitting too much. And then, just from their sport, typically is anterior chain focus. There's a way big overdevelopment in the front compared to the back. And then don't have that one kid that likes to work out with their friend at LA Fitness on top it's all biceps and pecs and quads. They work even more. So you got to do that much more to develop everything at the back, you know? Yeah.
Now, I'd read an article that was wrote about you when you were at the previous gym, and it kind of got into some of your strengths, and one of them was working with females. So being a male coach and being successful in the female side of it all, how were you able to do that?
Well, I think one of the biggest things, and probably the first thing that is most important, is not be one of the creeps. I'll tell you that. That's probably one of the first things, and making them feel comfortable, because it once I got one, and she felt comfortable with me and everything, she referred me better still to this day than any other client I ever had. I literally had half her high school team just because of her, and I didn't even have to reach out. You telling me with the boys, I don't know if it's like an ego thing, but with them, it's like you establishing that safety mechanism, and that's not just for them; their parents see that too. That's huge. And then number two, I think if you do a good job and they haven't been lifting weights, you build their confidence when you make them strong. Because a lot of times either they're not lifting at their school or even at the college level, you know, they're like the afterthought. Football, baseball, basketball, those are all going to come first. A sport like volleyball, sometimes even softball gets left to the wayside, or especially soccer. And soccer, the coach is telling them not to lift. So you make them the kid that now all of a sudden doesn't break down after all the stupid damn sprints that they do. And they're faster and they're stronger. And all of a sudden they're, you know, because there is contact. They do be pushing and shoving and clipping each other. All of a sudden she's the one doing that. She feels more confident. The coach sees it. The parent sees it. And then other players want to see. So I think it's you establishing that it's a safe zone, and then you just doing your job and making them a beast. You know, I think that's really just the two things that take care of themselves, because, you know, a lot of times they think I'm going to blow up if I start lifting, or it's going to be bad for their sport, or I'm not going to look girly anymore, stuff like that. So you can prove so much wrong by just doing your job. And then you by creating that safe space, because, and I'm sorry, I don't know why is volleyball predominantly a female sport, but predominantly there's male coaches? A little freaking weird to me. You know, I see it sometimes when I've gone to games, I'm like, I'm getting a vibe over here. And then I hear stories from parents and players, and I'm like, and he's still working. I mean, but you know, that's like all over the place all the time. I don't get it, but it's like, that's a thing. So if you can be one of the first male coaches, it's like, oh, I can trust Kalil. I can trust Steven. Like, that matters. Probably more than anything else, really. You know, and that goes for any type of coaching, I guess, or teacher, whatever. You know what I mean? So, but once you do your job as a strength coach, you'll do something that no other coach has done, which is now all of a sudden I'm confident because I'm strong. Now all of a sudden I don't get pushed off my spot if I am a female basketball player. Now all of a sudden, easy, objectively playing softball, I hit the ball farther, or I throw the ball harder. You know, or track, I beat my time, or swimming, I beat my time. You know, we all know the track and field, swimming, it's so easy to see how good we are at our job. I always wish I had more. I was like, I tell somebody, I say, I don't know shit about swimming, and I took a kid and took his rank down by 50 easily. And it's like, I just made him stronger. Wow, how hard was that?
You were talking about contact in there. I don't know, but I think high school girls basketball might be the most contact prone sport I've watched. They just let those girls beat the crap out of each other, you know? So yeah,
maybe like, we got to get this game on.
Yeah.
So just let them.
You know, and if you let boys play like that, it'd be fights the whole game, but they let girls play like that. So you have to have a strong female to be able to withstand the punishment that those girls put on each other. And you know, especially if they're not blowing the whistle, because girls just keep taking it a little further and a little further and a little further. And the importance of the weight room for the female basketball player. I'm not around a lot of, you know, soccer and stuff like that with who I work.
Where are you located, by the way?
I'm south of Kansas City, in the middle of nowhere, about an hour.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if basketball's big in Kansas, like near there. Is it?
Well, we're not very far from KU, so it depends what side of state line. It depends what side of state line you're on.
Okay.
I'm on the Missouri side, so you know. Yeah, and you mentioned that in there a little bit too. Teaching girls that they won't get bulky, but instead they'll like the results. I mean, it seems like That's the first thing out of their mouth when you start talking to them about training. Well, I don't want to get big. Well, it's going to take some pretty good drugs to get you big.
Mm-hmm.
So is it just time that it takes to prove to them that that's not what's going to happen?
I think probably the hardest thing is when you're first starting out, getting them to say, hey, it's not going to happen. But the easiest is once you have a few girls that have been working with you for a while, it's like, hey, they gained no weight or 3 pounds in 2 years. Their squat's gone up 100 and their vertical's gone up a quarter. Boom, that's it. And I think that's what a lot of things. It's like, you always have those kids that are like, are you sure this is good for me? Talking about the reverse hyper. And then you say, you see that girl over there that squats almost the same as you, only jumps 2 to 3 inches less. She does triple your weight on this reverse hyper. She's been doing it for 2 years. She has no back issues. She came to me with back issues though. She doesn't have them anymore. Easy. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of times it's like, you got to it's hard in the beginning, but once you can just point to somebody that you train, it's like, hey, they were in the same spot. And you can even have them, hey, come over here and tell this person about what, instead of making me yap about it, because they won't believe you. But hey, this person is paying me like you're about to, or you are. They have the same questions and their body shows the proof on why you should listen to me. Like that's really, because you don't want to be the, shut up and just do as I say. But when you can say, here's the proof, this is a person that plays your same sport, a little older, they're where you want to be, because they play in college, whatever. They had the same weaknesses you had, and they listen to me and look at the results, And if anything, I'm better than I was when I started training them. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think it's just hard when you first start.
The one thing about female athletics that stands out to me is the injury rate. As female wrestling's really taken off in the Midwest. It's
I've seen that, yeah.
It's growing really, really quickly. Well, those girls aren't necessarily conditioned or strong enough for what they're getting ready to do. And you see incredible injuries, Getting that dropped, is that all going to come through the weight room? Are we going to be able to mitigate some of these injuries through the weight room?
I think so, because I'm sure, because even sports at the professional level, like boxing and MMA, they're very new, broadly to lifting too. You still have some camps that have genetic freaks as fighters, and they're still not lifting. And sometimes it takes a few of those injuries where it's like, that shouldn't have happened, but it did, and you're really weak. I wonder how we could get you stronger. So I think because I always tell people, it's like, well, if you take a boy, let's say brother and sister, easiest. What's the only difference by the time they're in high school? One has more muscle mass. Okay, and that one runs faster. Okay, so we take naturally, this one's faster, gets hurt less in the same sport, not lifting, right? It's because they're stronger. They're faster. They're doing the exact same movements all the time. They're going to the same skill coach, blah, blah, blah. So that means then we can say, okay, well, if I get you stronger, shouldn't your injury rate go down? Right? And we run you less, because the sports that soccer has the most ACL tears. They run the most. They lift generally across the board, probably the least. Right? So a sport like wrestling, that's literally all contact. And then you're getting tired and fatigued, flipping somebody, being in a choke, getting your arm in a twist, like all those things. Damn, it's crazy that you're not lifting. I mean, and it's funny where that's still a sport where they're like, I got to master my technique. It's like, I've seen a lot of kids. Why do we have weight classes in that sport? Because a bigger kid with half the technique, if they weigh 300 pounds and that other kid weighs 120, I got news for you. That kid's going to throw him or pin him very easily. So within your own division, if you're stronger, you can get away with less, because there's going to be some people that, just like they have a natural gift to seeing things before they happen. They got a natural feel. What if you don't have that? But what if you're 20% stronger than them? They view conditioning as being a big added benefit. Like, I'm the person that can last the whole round. But what if you're the person that can literally throw anybody, even in an awkward position, off your back? To me, that's almost like a skill. It's just that you don't learn it at your school. You got to get somebody probably outside the school to get you there. And it's probably going to take a lot longer, depending on your genetics, depending on how you eat, how you sleep,
we've talked about basketball, we've talked about male athletes, female athletes, kind of going back to a general questions on training, but brief maximal tension. Are you more at the 3 to 5 rep range as opposed to a single rep, or where do you fall in there?
Yeah, I definitely do a lot of brief maximal tension work. So I do a lot of 3 to 5, and then I'll do a lot of either back down sets, or I'll do MSM, and I will do up to like 8 to 10 at the most. But a lot of times I'm doing between like 5 to 8 again, but just in that with a specialty bar now, or with free squat now, something like that. So yeah, I do a lot of that, and I think the younger the kid, the higher the reps need to be. But basically, with like my young kids, once they can put a bar in their back, I a lot of times will stay away from 1 rep maxing them. It'll still be a heavy 3 or 5, and then our working days will be multiple sets of 3 to 5. And sometimes I will do an AMRAP set where either they'll keep the weight, or I see if they're tired that day, maybe take some weight off and do an AMRAP, and then say, okay, last week you did this much for your AMRAP with this amount of weight. Because a lot of times with the kids, it's like they need more reps with the exercise to get better at the exercise. They need more reps because they could use a little bit more size, right? And they're not, they don't have enough neural drive to do, and technique and experience or confidence to really get enough out of the 1RM. And I think too, like Jared used to make the point of like, if you do that for a day, a lot of times it's not enough volume for that kid. So it's almost like not a wasted day, but you would get more out of doing sets of 5. You know what I mean? And even when we retest a squat, like depending on the kid, like I know, like, no, I'm not, like, even though I know you put another 30 pounds in the bar, I'm not going to do 1. And some kids, it's like, with some kids, it's like their 3 and 5 rep max is only 1% away from their 1. It's like, why am I even having doing a 1? Like, let's just wait till you actually are at that point, especially if it's not a sport like football where they're actually getting tested on a max. And really, well, football is a 225 rep test. So you don't even have to be good at 1 rep maxing. You know what I mean? I think that's more important for building confidence for the kid. And if we're being honest, it's good for your own Instagram. But let's make sure the kid is not going to get hurt and waste a day from doing it. Like, and that's something I've just developed. I just done over time. Like I used to do more of it. I used to do 1 rep maxes quicker than when I look back than I would have now. Like I don't, like I say, like, hey, this is what they can do for 5 without a belt. Like for kids, I think talking about how raw that lift is more important. Like, hey, their abs and obliques work. That's important. A lot of the kids, I mean, I've seen a lot of kids, you can't do a plank well for 30 seconds. It's important that if they eventually get to a 315 squat, let's say, and they weigh, 100 something pounds, and they can do it well, and you can see like they actually can brace. That's important because when they get to college or just later on and I actually give them a belt, we're going to see big gains from that. So I think for them, it's like, no, that is important. Like you say, like, this is how many we can do proficiently with good technique, and we can do this without a belt. And we can hold this position for this long. That's much more important, I think, with the athletes that are using the weight room just as a tool, nothing else.
Now you talked about it a few different times, and you had Sweet Burns on, but MSN, so mechanically similar movements, I think is what he calls that. So reading back to his fifth set book, I want to say he gets into like, if you eventually want to bench press a kid, you might start with a 3 board. Work to a 2 board, work to a 1 board, floor press. You won't rush right into the lift you want to lift. You'll work your way in from a higher position where they might be a little stronger. How much of that do you use in your training?
Well, like what I usually do is that's what those MSMs are. So a lot of times, like whether I'm straight bar benching them or full bar benching them, I will do it to the chest, right, as their main movement. And then like I'll do an MSM, let's say 3 board for 2 sets of 8, something like that. And then also big with the boards, try to get them to pause. Maybe they have a trouble time pausing. Maybe I see that I know they suck on incline. Maybe that's their MSM, or they suck off the chest. Maybe now I'm actually doing bow bar, so it does depend on the experience level of the kid. But yeah, that's where I now primarily actually use the specialty bars is for MSNs, unless the person's coming with me with like a shoulder issue already. or they're in season and maybe it's or they come to me and it's 12 weeks from a tryout. They never worked with me. I'm not gonna bother trying to teach them a straight bar bench and waste some weeks. To me, that's same with trying to teach them Olympic lifting when they got 12 weeks. No, I need to get you strong and jump as high as you ever jumped. Hopefully out of pain. So that's why I do use those MSMs. Yeah, and I think for kids, like on bench, I'll work with more heavy work with them as the MSM. So maybe the reps are only as high as maybe 5 to 6 for 2 to 3 sets, but there's more sets than my power lifter because they're not lifting nearly as much weight. So I know, and we need to work on the movement. So I know I can get away with 3 to 4 sets of 5 to 6 after they bench because, well, they only bench 135. It'll be fine if they do some more with 95, So yeah, that's how I do it.
Well, Coach, I appreciate all the time. I'm glad you're starting to feel better. When we first started talking, didn't know that we were going to get here, but we have. And so for you to take time out of your day, I really appreciate it.
No. I was looking forward to this. I was like, oh yeah, I got to start now. I got to start doing mine. I don't have an excuse anymore, especially because I'm at home. I got to start doing mine again because I think the last one I did was like, I don't know, maybe October, November of last year. That's the long. I don't go more than a month without doing one. So I appreciate it. Where does your where do you do it through Apple Podcasts or where does it go through?
Yeah, it's I use Buzzsprout, so it just puts it on all platforms.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, when you look up Voodoo Power, it pops up on all the podcast channels, and then I'll throw one up on YouTube too. It's plates and pancakes, I think, and yeah, that way people can see what you look like if that's what they want to do. A lot of people listen and drive.
Right.
So it just makes it super simple. I just upload them and, whatever they have to do to get them out everywhere they do. And it works out pretty good.
Okay, cool.
Well, Coach, I hope you have a great evening. And anytime you want to sit down and do this again, man, let me know.
So now I have a place. Do you have your own gym? Like, where do you work out of?
So I guess you'd call it a gym. It's a small space that we built during COVID, to kind of, everything in the country was shut down. And it depends on, what you thought about what was going on at the time and how worried you were to get out and around people. Well, not everybody was as worried as some people. And however that worked out's fine. I'm not judging that, but I had some kids that wanted to work out and I wasn't too concerned. So we set a place up and, we took precautions and we lifted. Originally we started in the barn and then we moved to the alleyway of the barn. And then we decided that wasn't going to work in Missouri winters. So then we built a garage onto the barn and then built the gym. And then here this last week, we added a bunch of concrete. I'm getting ready to make that a little bit bigger.
Yeah. Were you working at a high school or something like that before?
No, I'm just an electrician. I'm not, I never was involved.
Oh, wow.
I didn't see myself doing any of this. I didn't see myself doing the podcast. I didn't see myself having a gym. It was just,
so I'm going to have you now back on my pod. Now I got a bunch of questions. Now I'm going to save it. Now I'm going to have you back on mine and we're going to get down to the nitty gritty. But I just wondered because I was like, oh, now I have a place in Kansas City. If I have a kid that end up going to KU or something, well, it's a little hour, but if he's serious, he'll go. But I always like to say, like, meeting new coaches that are in a state. So I have someone, because I always say I'd rather you train with somebody that I trust than me train you online, because I know you're gonna bullshit a little bit one day, you can get a little fucking tired and shit, and actually have someone watch you in person. And if you have the equipment, that's the thing too. If you're working on LA Fitness, it's like at best maybe we have a decent squad rack, but you got to fight the douchebag to get to it, So that's cool. So you got somebody in Kansas now.
Yeah. So whatever I can do to help out, we're right on the line. So we have a few schools around us, so not terribly far away. But yeah, anything I can do to help, man, just let me know.
Appreciate you.
All right, man. Well, you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too.